Oh, hi there. Welcome to Shogi in the West, an English language podcast for active Shogi players and Shogi learners around the world. In this podcast, we focus on the topics and the people that matter to those of us outside Japan trying to find our way in the game. And before I start the show, I'd like to make the usual, which is actually becoming the now usual, brief public service announcement that most of you have already heard before. But in case anyone is new to the podcast, welcome, if that's the case. Or in case anyone has been on the fence, I'll do my song and dance again, and I'll say, if you are interested in being a guest on this podcast, where I interview you and we speak about shogi, please do not hesitate to contact me and let's get talking. I'm available on the Shogi Harbor Discord, either direct messages or in my own little channel there. I'm available via email, shogidad81@gmail.com. I'm available in the YouTube comments. So don't worry about your skill level or your experience. If you have thoughts about shogi and have played shogi and like it, don't like it, I'd love to hear from you. And perhaps today's topic will get more of those thoughts flowing. This this is kind of a could potentially be a spicy one, but let's consider this. Chess has hundreds of millions of players across nearly every country on the planet. Go, while nowhere near as popular as chess, does have a strong international following, even sustaining professional organizations outside of East Asia. There's, as far as I know, in the United States, there are professional ranks, and in Europe, there have been professional ranks for a while now. Mahjong, according to my limited research in putting together this episode, is continuing to rise in popularity, despite being a complicated game with multiple rule sets and plenty of Asian lingo and culture around it. But shogi, despite its depth and its potential for excitement and drama, remains relatively niche outside of Japan. So let's dig in today as to why that might be the case. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. And in a future episode, I can run through some of these. I have my ideas. I'm going to try to present some of them, but I don't pretend to know anything about this stuff. I just have my own thoughts and my own experience, and I look to other people who are more experienced or have thought about this more to maybe change and mold my feelings on this. So there is a large Reddit discussion about this topic going back a couple months, and I've been stewing on that one for a while. I'll link it in the show notes, of course. And if you're interested in the topic, I recommend checking that out. So, as a baseline or a starting point today, let me just do one extra check here. I would like to at least make the most basic case for why shogi is a great game worthy of attention. When I discuss this on stream or in person, some of the common responses I see for why people love shogi include, and I'm just going to give a brain dump of some of these. Drops. Unlike chess, this is a common saying that people will bring up, but unlike chess, where the game can often be simplified by trading pieces, without going into specifics and without, it feels almost like I'm not giving chess a fair shake, but the game can often be simplified by trading pieces. Shogi's complexity and sort of move potential increase as the pieces are traded off. What might seem like a slow game during the initial few moves in a shogi game, that can turn into a whirlwind, an absolute whirlwind of activity and chaos once pieces are removed from the board and placed on the piece stand. Comebacks. Shogi is a game of comebacks. This is a saying that I like, and material and positional advantages, they can vanish instantly. Instantly, as anyone who's watched my streams can attest. Even after the most innocuous seeming decisions, speed and initiative can overwhelm in the most shocking ways imaginable. In a recent conversation I was having on stream with viewers, an argument was being made that unlike in chess, where playing at a disadvantage is a slow grind of suffering, potentially for hours if you're playing in a tournament setting, over the board. Just in shogi, these games, they can still be exhilarating because there are so many ways to creatively attempt to come back. So the context of this discussion I believe I was probably trying to make a case that shogi was too complicated and there's too much chaos even when you build a huge advantage. The counterpoint here was that unlike chess, and I think chess gets an unfair shake here, but I'll play the argument, is that unlike chess, the games can still be exhilarating once you go down, in different ways. So that's something called comebacks. Culture. Shogi is very much a Japanese game, and that is a persistent lure for some people. It's a polite culture of mutual respect and personal growth. It's a dramatic departure from some other gaming spheres, especially some online gaming spheres. Dynamicism, along the same lines with the benefits of the piece drops. Games of shogi pretty rarely stagnate, at least in my experience, and playing and watching a lot of online games. Once middle game opens up, the opening finishes or the opening goes through its paces and the middle game opens up, the game excitement continues to grow until the end. There are very few draws in shogi, and that's a huge bonus to some chess players who would rather play a more decisive game. I do think this idea that shogi doesn't have draws is overstated, and I think there's nuance to be had there in that discussion, and I've actually thought of making a separate podcast simply about draws and Senichite in shogi, but I won't go into too deeply here. But I will just say that there are many players, many chess players, but also some other players who like to theory craft the games that they choose to play or that they think about deciding to play. When you're theory crafting, superficially at least, the lack of draws is a big bonus. Comparing to Go or Baduk, Shogi has a better name than Go because you don't have to say Go game or Baduk. But anyway, comparing to Go or Baduk, that's another game that will often end with a whimper, as far as I'm concerned. The game ends with a whimper as players fill up the board, they pass their moves, and then they count the stones. They make territory and they count the stones. In my experience, and to my tastes, as someone who is not a great Go player, but way back when, did get to around the 2Q level on KGS. So, not great, certainly not great, but not terrible, and played plenty of Go. There's very little visceral thrill at the end of a game of Go, especially compared to shogi and chess. So that's actually one of the reasons why I ended up drifting from Go, is that I sort of like the visceral thrill of these end games. I like there being an obvious goal. I like there being a race. I like there being, some special level of excitement at a particular move or moves. Scale is another thing that I think Shogi has going for it. Shogi is, without sounding kind of cheesy, I guess I'll say, Shogi is a grand game. It is a grand game. While 9x9 doesn't sound much larger than 8x8, which is what chess has, in practice, many people, myself included, tend to consider Shogi to be a more epic battle with potentially multiple fronts versus chess, which could often be likened to a skirmish, relatively. I think this may have something to do with Shogi's slow pieces requiring more positioning, especially in the opening, and planning across the board. And it's later complemented by the ability to drop in the paratroopers for more targeted and precise tactical engagements. But it's pretty epic. It has the possibility of being pretty epic, and it feels large. It feels in many ways larger than it actually is. It's 9x9, like I said, but oftentimes these games, especially once the pieces are off the board and in the piece stand or on the piece stand, the game just feels immense. Equipment. This is one of my favorite topics, but while I'm an equipment lover for pretty much any of these games we'd be discussing today, I think it's undeniable that Shogi equipment can be pretty special. The aesthetics of quality Shogi equipment in conjunction with the sounds of the game, whether it be piece snapping or clock countdowns, vocal countdowns or clock beeping, is truly something special in my opinion, in my humble or not so humble opinion. And it can be a real draw to the game. Also, outside of the equipment, somewhat related, I actually think Shogi has something pretty cool with the availability of Menjo rank certificates, signifying achievement and progress in the game. It's a separate topic that I say this acknowledging and aware of the fact that Japan Shogi Association somehow can't manage to get these Menjo certificates to people in any reasonable time frame and at any reasonable cost. I acknowledge that there are reasons to not be so enthusiastic about Menjo certificates because of sort of the circumstances around them, but I still think they're pretty cool. I'm a nerd. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So, with all these reasons to be infatuated with and intrigued by Shogi, then why isn't it catching on? Why is it not catching on like chess and Go and Mahjong and these other games have? Well, I guess, first we can take a look a bit at the cultural and historical context. Shogi is deeply tied to Japanese culture, Japanese language, and Japanese aesthetics. Many of us who love Shogi have no problem with this, and in fact, many of us believe this to be a huge point in favor of Shogi, as I mentioned previously, when I called it a positive aspect for the game. How many Shogi players do we get online or at the local Shogi clubs because they've learned of it through an existing infatuation with Japanese culture and Japanese media? At least a non-negligible number, at least. However, how many people are turned off by having this cultural tie so heavily in your face from the get-go, straight from, as the kids would say, right off the rip? Actually, I don't know if the kids would say that anymore. I don't know. Maybe the kids from a long time ago. But straight from the get-go, this cultural tie is heavily in your face. You will never know for sure because we'll simply never see the people who instantly are turned off and just never try the game. I suspect many board game players just want to play a great game and they're not looking to change their lifestyle for it. Uh, it's they want to play a game, but it doesn't have to overtake their sense of place in the world. It's understandable. Games are just, air quotes, just a diversion for many people, even for people that end up essentially dedicating a large percentage of their casual time to them. I personally know some chess players who, if you ask them, like, would you call yourself, like, do you identify as part of your self identity a chess player? I don't think these people would say yes, but they play tens to potentially hundreds of hours of chess per month and per year, and that's something. That's something. To me, anyway. As another cultural point, let's think about chess. Again, it's hard to avoid these comparisons, especially when we're talking about why one is not as popular as the other. But that's a game that spread through Europe, where modern rules were developed, and through colonization and influence, it was globally in nearly every country imaginable. On top of that, chess became a battlefield between countries and cultures. Most notably, I'd say, as a household feature in the Cold War, between the United States and the Soviet Union. Who hasn't heard that story? After those days, chess and Go became newsworthy as technological and sort of artificial intelligence challenges. Chess's Deep Blue battle versus legendary world champion Garry Kasparov was important. It was IBM and the machines versus humanity's sort of unwavering and courageous and arrogant genius. Go's counterpart in this war between computers and humankind, AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol, was in many ways more important than Deep Blue versus Kasparov, as it was Google's DeepMind AI, taking on what many believe to be the last bastion of human intelligence and creativity, Go. But many people who don't play Go still know of Go, I've found, and they respect it as, rightly or wrongly, the most difficult and creative board game humans have ever created. In this epic context of chess and Go, Shogi was just in the middle. Just another chess-like game where computers can also beat humans. No big deal. It was limited to Japan geographically, and it never pushed beyond those boundaries. Its cultural identity, I would say, is both its strength and its weakness. Just moving on from culture now, I guess. I suppose now is the first time in this episode to mention everyone's favorite excuse for why the game isn't popular. And that's the kanji characters on the pieces. No getting around it. While my experience and the experience of a few people whose experience I trust far more than my own, has led me to believe that this excuse overstates the issue. I do think it's undeniable that the kanji characters can be intimidating for many people, and that there are certainly people who have never given the game a chance because of the pieces. Whether or not these people would have just found another convenient excuse, afterward, is another issue. So I guess what I'm saying there is, even if the pieces were really cool and easy to tell apart, and they were intriguing, it's possible that these people would have found just another excuse. But that said, I think we can't just dismiss the pieces as completely irrelevant. Too many people are spending, I would say, too much time trying to develop these magical pieces that will bring in shogi players and will allow the game to shine. And I can't I can't dismiss that. Even if I do think it's misplaced, I can't dismiss it. More on this to come later, but for now, I'll stop talking about pieces. What about just accessibility? So non-piece accessibility, is that a problem? Well, yes. Language in Shogi can be a challenge. I've mentioned the pieces, like I said, and I won't go too much into that here. But I'll just point out there's no universally recognizable iconography, as there is with, say, chess or even mahjong. Mahjong is foreign, and yet, people don't seem to have any problems with mahjong pieces. It might be easily overcome, but it can be a light initial hurdle that many people simply won't be interested in jumping over. But how about language in the game itself? Sente, gote, tsume, makimashita, yoroshiku onegaishimasu, tataki no fu, mino castle, sanken bisha, nakabisha, yagura castle, on and on, on and on, on and on. Shogi is just a barrage of Japanese terms that must be learned in order to communicate even basically about the game with others. I think there may be some disagreement there. I don't know where that disagreement comes from. I think you simply cannot be fluent in this game or take part in the community of this game without knowing and having to learn a bunch of Japanese terms. Is this a huge problem? I don't know. Honestly, I like most things, I'll just say, I don't know. But I think it's just another thing potentially adding to the difficulty in adopting the game. A bigger problem, though, I'd say, is that almost all meaningful books, websites, videos, and teaching materials are in the Japanese language. Even compared to the Go world, there are very few English language shogi books. You see the Shogi in the West podcast, episode 4, for information about these. And the quality of these books is generally not all that high when compared to middle and upper tier chess and Go content. I think that's fair to say. Technology-wise, chess engines, chess apps, and online chess platforms are plentiful and mature. Shogi versions of these either don't exist, are built with far lower quality, and or you do only a fraction of what the chess versions do. It's a new world out there. It's a new gaming world out there in 2025. We're at the end of 2025, and it's only growing. It's only changing more. It's a new world, and I think people really prefer to engage in a game where technology is a partner in the process of learning and growing. It's not the old days anymore, for better or worse. With Shogi, it's most often a battle to the death, I'd say, in trying to make some of this stuff work, in trying to live a quality of life in this game. Technologically. What about media and popular culture? How does Shogi fare here? Well, in terms of the mainstream, I'd say not too well. Not too well at all. Chess is a huge part of popular culture, undeniably. And popular culture outside of just the United States, where I live, all over the world. And that has even accelerated over the past 5 years or so. I would say, I could be wrong. What do I know? But I would say it has. Netflix's Queen's Gambit series was a large cultural moment. And it triggered sort of one of the recent chess booms. There have been multiple chess booms in the past 5 years. And at a smaller level, I'd say, chess boards and chess references are all over modern pop culture. Heck, even what is this? Just a few days ago, my wife and I were watching a movie. Just a random new movie on Netflix called, I think it was on Netflix. Maybe it was somewhere else, but it was called like the Thursday Murder Club. It's some old people. It's some old people. Some famous actors that are now old. They sort of solve a murder in a nice setting. And in this movie, there was an entire little subplot featuring a non-main character where he played chess, and he recorded his chess moves. And this actually came to play out in the conclusion of the movie. It's so embedded in popular culture that people don't even need an explanation for it. They see chess, they know what it is, they understand sort of the some of the meta ideas about chess, and there it is. So you see it everywhere. Go isn't quite there. The game of Go is not quite there like chess, especially in the United States anyway, or in the West. But it's not too far off. It was used as a reference for how brilliant the character was in A Beautiful Mind. And even people people who didn't know the game can sort of look at it. Like people watching that movie who don't know the game at all can sort of look at it, and they can understand the complexity and the difficulty in the game. And they can possibly get enamored just with the elegant beauty of it. It's black and white. It's an obvious clash of sides, and there's stones and there's wood and there's shapes, and it's a beautiful aesthetic game. Just sort of on its own. Obviously, Shogi is a beautiful aesthetic game, but the abstraction and the just sort of out of context beauty of Go, I think, cannot be denied. The documentary about AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol, which is available on YouTube for free. It's published by, I think, the DeepMind account, and obviously they're part of Google, and YouTube is part of Google. That documentary, it seems to have made the leap beyond sort of simple game nerd circles, as far as I can tell. And I've actually overheard multiple conversations over the years in non-gaming situations that referenced this documentary, a documentary about a game. Admittedly, I live in Silicon Valley, where people talk about tech and Google is a thing, and so you might overhear this kind of discussion, but maybe this happens elsewhere. I don't know, but I certainly don't hear anyone talking about Shogi. What does Shogi have? March Comes On Like a Lion. I love it. I love the series. I've watched it 3 or 4 times through the anime series, which obviously is not the entire manga. And I think it did a great job. A good job, great job. I don't. It did a good job of appealing sort of to anime watchers, but it's not exactly an inspirational series about Shogi. Shogi is mostly, as far as I'm concerned, just background noise in the series. Naruto seems to have inspired some people to look into Shogi, from what I understand. But again, these are already anime watchers, and they're probably more open to Japanese cultural items. I had high hopes, extremely high hopes, too high hopes, I suppose, for the recent Netflix drama Miss King. But in the end, and this is debatable, there doesn't appear to have been much of an effort to make it so accessible to regular meat and potato English language viewers. Also, despite Shogi being a critical, central component of the series, unlike March Comes Like a Lion, where it could have been anything, Shogi is a critical component to its core of the series. There's very little actual discussion of Shogi. And the game isn't presented in any sort of inspirational way, as far, again, as in my opinion. That's my take on it. They don't talk about the pieces. They don't talk about how the pieces move. Obviously, the people in Japan might be a little more familiar, but the scenes that show shogi, it's just random. It's just random shogi. It's not. It's random display shogi. There's no continuity between moves. There's no continuity between what happens. It's not real shogi games. It's not something I feel that will bring in shogi viewers. And in my limited experience as an English language shogi streamer, it hasn't. It's brought in for me one great new viewer and supporter of the channel. And literally no one else. No one else has, and I've asked many times, no one else has said they found shogi because of Miss King. Just this one person. So if you're watching this podcast and you learned of shogi from Miss King and were intrigued by shogi from Miss King, please let me know in the comments. I love this kind of data. Anyway, as far as I'm concerned, the best shogi media, by far, no discussion, is the live action 81 or Hachi One Diver. I'll say Hachi One Diver. I won't call it 81. Hachi One Diver. It's 81 Diver if you're looking for it on YouTube, and I believe it is available. The best is Hachi One Diver, but it's an old series. It's difficult to just randomly come across this series. Difficult, maybe even impossible, to just randomly come across this without explicitly looking for it. And it's not at all in any way mainstream. And like I said, it is older, and it's at a low resolution. It's an old, low TV resolution. It is subtitled by fans, and they're great subtitles. And like I said, it's amazing. I love the series. I've watched it so many times. And just thinking about it now, every time I mention it on stream or now on this podcast, every time I even mention it, I get in my back of my mind, I'm getting excited thinking about watching again. It's not like Hikaru no Go. It's totally different. And there's some subject matter that is not quite like kids friendly, I'll just say. But it's shogi. It's about shogi. The games are self-contained nuggets of fun watching, interest. It's a great series. I love it. And if Miss King was half of this series, I think it could have been a phenomenal success. But alas, I don't think there's any way the available shogi media would appeal to mainstream casual audience as it's been presented. I just don't. I'll mention just briefly in terms of sort of media and content creation. I'll mention streamers. It seems to me that these days when someone gets interested in a game, one of the things they do is they go to Twitch or they go to YouTube and they want to watch other people playing their game. They want to watch the people playing the game and learn from some people. And chess has too many, you could argue, streamers of all skill levels, of all person types, to match the tastes and the interests of any viewer. And you can get a sense of people's passion for chess by watching chess streamers and watching YouTube videos about chess. It's on full display. Go, like I said, a much more limited game. As far as I have seen in the past couple of years, always has at least one or two streamers running. At the times I've looked at Twitch, there's always at least one or two Go streamers, letting people get that fix for watching a game when maybe they're not in a position to play themselves. It's a way to show the world that people love playing this game. Shogi has, well, almost nothing. in terms of English language speakers. That was one of the reasons why I started streaming close to 2 years ago now. This is late November 2025. In December of 2023, I started streaming, and I've been doing it, basically at least 5 days a week. And there's still almost nothing besides that. And one of my goals is to try to show people, look, people are out there playing. People love this game. It's fun to play. Here's someone who's enthusiastic. Here's some old guy who's enthusiastic and can rise the ranks a bit, can learn the game. And we just don't have much. There's some Japanese players on YouTube, but I just don't think that appeals to the way that they present the game. I don't think it appeals that much to the Western audience. Most of these content creators in Japan don't use a camera. Obviously, they're speaking Japanese, and there is no good automatic translation software for, I'll just say, Japanese shogi. And even watching videos in the VODs, there's that translation software is terrible too. It's very difficult to get a sense of what someone's even saying. Like, it's so much nonsense. There's one of the streamers that I occasionally watch these days. His name's Sora, and it gets auto dubs. And the auto dubs, I think, in general, are better than the automatic translations. It seems like it's a different system that's doing like the subtitling versus the dubs. But anyway, these dubs are they're so weird. They're just so weird. And I think a lot of these ideas just don't come across in translation software. And it's almost nonsensical. So you can't get an attachment to these streamers, really, because they're not speaking your language and you can't see their face. It's just a voice. It's just a voice. And it's tough. It's tough. I don't know. I've had this discussion. Actually, this morning I had a discussion with someone about this topic of, people, advanced players maybe not wanting to play as much online or stream. But without being too dramatic, I think it's a big problem. It's a big miss in the media space, is that we don't really have anyone going out there. I'm trying, but we don't have anyone going out there and putting the game best foot forward. And anyway, that said, I think, I've talked about culture and language. I've talked about accessibility, talked about media and streaming. And I've even talked a bit about like some technology aspects, engines and whatnot. It's quite possible that each of these contribute to Shogi's lack of popularity. I'd say, likely, not just quite possible. I'd say it's likely. But what about another reason? Lots of Shogi players may not admit this one. And, it's common and fun to hate on the other team, but chess is a great game. I'm going to say, full stop. Chess is a great game. It's already incredibly easy to get started. Many people in the West were already taught the game at a young age. And there is absolutely no difficulty whatsoever in finding people to play online at your level, or above your level, or below your level, or over the board. Tournaments? Tournaments? In the United States, we have 2 small Shogi tournaments per year. 2 tiny, I'll say tiny, but tiny to small tournaments per year. In the San Francisco Bay Area, where I live, Silicon Valley, we have what? I'm not in tune with this culture, but I know that these exist. 1 to 2 tournaments per week, I'd say, at least. It's really a tough sell. So the aspects that make Shogi unique and the parts of the game that endear us to it need to get visibility to make up for this. It's tough. It's very tough. Add to that the fact that shogi games take longer. Wall clock, on the wall clock, shogi games take longer, and the game is possibly too difficult. And it's even tougher sell, not only to get someone to choose shogi over chess, but to also stick with shogi instead of going back to chess. So, ignoring the difficulty and just getting people in the door, keeping them there can be tough. Like I said, I think this is a big aspect. And I think this is a big negative for Go. And I think why Go has not been so successful online, and maybe, and has been diminishing around the world, is my understanding, is that the games take too long. The games simply take too long in the Go world. I think shogi is close to that as well, where to my thinking and to what I see and to what I see people saying and my own thoughts, chess seems to be almost right in that sweet spot of time and number of moves per game, where it's just not too long. Shogi can be very long, and shogi can be just too difficult. Like Go, there are so many moments where it's just like, what do I do? And even if you're quote winning, it's like, what do I do? And how long is this game going to last? How do I just finish this game? It's too difficult, and that can be exhausting, I would say. A lot of people, when they want to play a game, they want to have fun, they want to relax. They don't want to come away from it just absolutely gutted and lost and exhausted. Maybe shogi leans a little bit too far to that side. I don't know. But so what can we do about all this? What can we do about this? What could realistically change? What can we do? I'm not going to pretend to have any answers. But I'll start with the things I'm trying. And I've been trying now, like I said, for the past couple of years. That is streaming regularly, trying to produce this podcast. This is episode 21, unless I renumber things in the future. But this is the 21st episode of this podcast. We're in our 6th month of production, and to a lesser degree, I'm just trying to be a good ambassador for the game in public when playing club games at the coffee shop or wherever. I can't say I feel I've made much of a dent in any of these aspects, unfortunately, but I'm not going to give up just yet. I care too much about this. Beyond that, we could get more English language shogi materials. There's some small movement here, some minuscule movement here, but perhaps, I'm thinking we just need one person to really jumpstart it. One great communicator to really jumpstart the English language shogi materials and prove that it can be done in a meaningful and sustainable way. It doesn't have to be a full-time income, but some way to sustain someone's efforts. I think the key here is that it's a two-way street. This potential author needs to show that high-quality shogi learning material can be published, but, and perhaps more importantly, the shogi community needs to show that it will support high-quality shogi material. It's a real open question to me, without going too deeply into this. Maybe this could be an extra podcast. Maybe when I'm just when I'm at my wit's end and I just want to burn everything down, we can talk about this topic. But it's a real open question as to whether or not the shogi community is actually large enough and, dare I say, mature enough to do this. Or if the shogi community is composed of mostly young people who are relatively uncommitted to shogi and are simply looking for a way to feel different from the mainstream. a way to feel special. I'm not just a chess player, I'm a shogi player. Some way to be quirky, some way to be odd, some way to be different, a way to feel special. I think that's a real open question. That one of the things that amazes me and I really appreciate when I'm listening to chess podcasts and to a certain extent observing the Go world, it seems like there are adults. There are some adults at the wheel over there, and obviously there's tons of kids in chess. There maybe some would say too many kids. It's a huge pastime game for kids, and kids are a tremendous part of any game that has hopes of growing. But there are adults in the chess world running clubs, predictably running clubs, running tournaments, supporting chess authors, supporting chess content creators, supporting chess equipment makers. There are people, adults meeting each other to play chess in casual ways. There are people online discussing chess and Go in adult, respectful, thoughtful ways. Again, this isn't really like an age thing, but it's a maturity of community thing. And I just don't know if shogi is there in the West. I just don't know. It's something I've been thinking a lot about, especially when wondering if the shogi world got a high quality educator, or if the shogi world got this infusion of high quality shogi software, would the shogi community even support it, or would they just ignore it and go on making memes and stuff like that? I don't know. It's an open question. What else could change? Let's step away from that. What else could change? Realistically, online servers and services, and I'm thinking primarily Shogi Wars now, can improve both the playing experience and the study and or learning experience. They certainly have great models. And by models, I mean not like AI. They certainly have good role models. Both chess.com and Lichess are, in my opinion anyway, and this is not to start a discussion about this, brilliant platforms for players and students and teachers of chess. They serve everybody. If we had half as nice an online shogi service, with even a small percentage of the number of players and teachers that Lichess has, it would be much easier to sell people that are interested in the game. How is that new player onboarding these days? Not too good. How about new player retention once we capture their interests? As I said, even worse. And this is rarely even discussed, in my opinion. People are always so gung-ho about the pieces and discussing the pieces and talking about how we can't get new players into shogi because of the pieces. And ignoring the fact that I do feel that that's a miss. That's just a mischaracterization of the situation. It doesn't do anything to talk about the elephant in the room, I think, is that retention is the big problem in shogi. Once someone knows the pieces, and that's going to come pretty quickly, how do we keep them playing? How do we keep them interested? Are they going to be interested if the online services are antiquated and it's hard to play a game at their level, and there's nowhere nice to learn more or to train more? I don't think so. If they want to play on their desktop like a normal person, and they've got to run some jank web version of a mobile app that itself is dated and jank, who's going to put up with that? Some people. I do. I put up with it and I praise it. I put up with it, I praise it, I support it financially, and I stream it. Shogi Wars, I'm talking about, obviously. But if I'm being honest, this is I try to be positive with it because I want to support the people that are doing the work in our community, and Heroes, the people behind Shogi Wars, are doing that work. But it's rough compared to the state of art in anything else. Not even to mention online video games. But anyway, these have just been my thoughts. I think there's been a lot of great discussion around the internet for this topic. And I'll add, that big recent Reddit discussion to the show notes, like I said earlier. I won't talk too much about that here. I think I've touched a lot of the things that were discussed there. But I certainly thought about that discussion, that thread, a lot over the past couple months. And I consider the ideas in that thread, and no doubt it has colored some of my opinions here to some degree. But I am, as always, more curious, and most curious, I should say, what you all think. Should Shogi adapt for an internationalized audience? And what would that mean? What would get you to play more Shogi, either online or over the board? Is Shogi's cultural heritage and uniqueness something that should be preserved, even if it limits the global spread? If you're an active Shogi player, would you continue to play Shogi if some concessions were made to an international audience at the expense of the cultural identity? Let me know in the YouTube comments, or send me an email at shogidad81@gmail.com, and maybe I'll bring some of these comments into a future episode. And on that note, I'll just say, I'll close it up. I'll wait for the comments. And again, my channels are open if you'd like to be interviewed. Thank you for listening. And Thanksgiving just finished. Last week's episode was a Thanksgiving-related podcast, but I would like to thank the supporters again. You keep that fire alive in me. You help me get through these Shogi days. It's not always easy, as I've said. It's not always easy to try to keep that excitement going. But seeing people out there appreciating what I do is huge. And it is the thing that will keep this kind of content going in the future, the stream going in the future. And I thank you all for it. So I'll close up. Thanks so much. It's been great discussing this. I know there are things I've missed. I tried to keep this. What is it? Time check here. Okay, so we're closing in on the hour. I want to keep this in so that it's not this just dump of hours of discussion, but it gives us time to breathe and maybe revisit in the future as our ideas change. So hopefully you've liked listening to it. Hopefully you've liked the other podcasts recently. Hoping to have another interview soon. And thank you. Take care. Enjoy your Shogi. Enjoy this game. It is a great game. We all know it is. And so let's do our best to try to make it even better. Thanks. Take care. Bye.